Dokkan is always trying to release new units that are appealing and powerful, but with them constantly testing new formulas and abilities, every once in a while, an insanely powerful unit slips through the cracks and changes the game's history. So in this video, I've compiled a list of 10 units that were so ahead of their time that Dokkan almost regretted not testing them properly. Some of these units had designs that went missing for years after the release because the devs didn't want to accidentally power creep the current meta. By the way, thank you guys so much for the recent support. I really love you guys. I couldn't do this without you, and I really appreciate all the support you guys give me. It really motivates me to keep making videos. Now, without further ado, let's get straight into the list. Number 10 has to go to STR Gogeta in his prime. I know I always glaze this guy, but come on. If you were there in 2016, you know why. This guy almost single-handedly ended the Dokkan Dark Ages. The two main reasons this guy was ahead of his time was firstly because he was effective against all types, and second, he was the first rainbow leader in the game. This combo of being the best and most versatile leader in the game on top of doing the best damage in the game no matter who you were facing was lethal and essentially pressured Dokkan into releasing new mono leads in hopes of making players run anything other than double Gogeta. And to be honest, it also led to one of their biggest regrets, which leads me to my number 9 spot. This spot has to go to AGL Super Vegito. I mean, let's be honest here. The counter mechanic with damage reduction against normals in an era where the hardest fights were Dokkan events made almost every fight a joke. In my opinion, this was a good thing because instead of making the boring Dokkan events that you need to complete to awaken your characters insanely hard, Dokkan realized they needed to start making difficult content its own thing. Vegito's counter was essentially like doing an extra super attack every time you got hit by a normal attack. No matter what else they released for the rest of the year, everyone knew Vegito was the GOAT and AGL mono teams were going to dominate simply because you can run 2 Vegitos. To this day, if Dokkan ever dares release a unit with counters, they make sure to lock it behind a transformation or give it a strong drawback to balance it. The Super EZA for this Vegito literally had to be a fraud or he would have been the best Super EZA in the game. We often complain that he's a complete fraud when getting supered, but that's literally the only way to balance a unit like this. LR Tech Vegito is a perfect example of how broken a fully kitted counter unit can be. He literally slays most bosses in a turn and doesn't even die to supers that hit for millions of damage. Realistically, it's not even fair to expect that AGL Vegito should have any defense against supers just off the reign of terror he had back in 2016 to 2018. He's definitely one of my favorite units ever, and he's definitely one of Dokkan's least favorite characters to balance. Physical Vegito Blue would be redundant to mention later in the list, so here he is in the same spot as Super Vegito. All I gotta say is that his EZA was insane and aged pretty well. I hope his Super EZA finds a way to avoid being in the same boat as Super Vegito's Super EZA. I also hope you guys subscribe so we can reach 10k. We're literally less than 500 subs away. Now let's move on to number 8. Low-key, you gotta hear me out here, but ain't UI Goku. This was one of the first units in Dokkan to have dodge built into their kit at a high level. Sure, there was an HP condition to transform, but that was not really an issue, especially once the 3rd anniversary LRs came out and could heal you when they transform. The other thing about this unit is that you could actually make use of him even without his Dokkan awakening, since he gained a 50% chance to dodge when being below 50% HP, even though he didn't transform. Honestly, one of the most unique cards in the game just for incorporating the transformed version's abilities in the base card. I think this unit was ahead of its time just off the fact that ever since his release, most dodge units don't have over 70% base dodge. This guy was the OG dodge unit and paved the way for most of the ones that came later on. Number 7 goes to AGL TUR Golden Frieza. This AGL TUR Frieza is nothing really special, but what has always made him stand out is his crazy damage reduction. 90% damage reduction when you have over 40% HP is wild. No other unit has lasted as long as this guy, and he is technically one of the best aging units to ever be released. Changing his damage reduction with a Super EZA would be more of a nerf than a buff at this point. This Frieza came out in 2015 and awakened in 2016 and has been banned from most events simply because no boss could hurt you if Frieza was slot 1 and you had over 40% HP. This guy was released when the devs had no idea what Dokkan would look like in nearly a decade, so his kit wasn't carefully designed with power creep in mind like most units nowadays. This Frieza is literally runnable on the new Gogeta 220 team and can actually hold his own. He has basically no raw stats though, so you might take a few thousand from normals and supers, but other than that, this unit still holds up decently well 9 years post-release. He just won't really do anything besides take hits. Moving on to number 6, this spot goes to TEQ Free-to-Play Bulma. She isn't in this spot to say that she's better than any of the other units I've mentioned. I'm putting her here because for a free-to-play unit in 2017, she was amazing. She was a free rainbow TUR that could be used on the relatively powerful Gotenks or SSJ3 Goku mono tech teams. Free-to-play units of this era were incredibly weak compared to some notable LRs. Nowadays, some free-to-play units are even comparable to recent releases. But during this time period, I feel like this Bulma with her healing and damage reduction made her an outstanding free-to-play unit. I know it's only a 70% chance that she actually gets her damage reduction reduction, but for the time period she was released in, her healing, stats, and somewhat reliable defense gave her more than enough value to be run. This unit was ahead of its time just based off utility. She also has solid links as a cherry on top. Her EZA in 2023 also did her justice by allowing her to fill the same role but on newer and better teams that could actually make use of her links. Apparently the 70% chance to reduce damage activates on every attack, so even if the first attack doesn't proc the defense, she can still clutch up and get the damage reduction on most of the other attacks in the turn. This is a double-edged sword, but definitely something that can be extremely valuable and I think makes her worthy of having a spot on this list. Number 5 goes to the Janemba EZA. The Super EZA is really good too, but I'm talking specifically about the regular EZA that broke the game. Nowadays, the base EZA is nothing to write home about, but when he released, having guard with dodge was incredibly powerful and unique. Sure, it wasn't a lot of dodge, but it still made him incredibly useful, allowing him to nearly surpass both newer counterparts at the time. He essentially had the same kit as them, but with more raw stats. Being better than the TEQ Janemba was debatable, but the fact that it was even up for discussion that a 2-year-old EZA was close to a 2020 unit was wild. Basically, what I'm saying is that this card's EZA was so ahead of its time that most of his future units were designed exactly the same way and even competed with him. Number 4 is the Spirit Bomb Goku from the 1000 days login bonus. This is the one unit I want to mention almost solely for their leader skill. Having 3 key and 100% stats to all types instantly made him the best leader of 2017. You only lose a 20% buff and you can run all the best units in the game together. He also gave 25% attack and defense support to allies for 1 turn with his ultra super attack and had a nuking/healing passive. Sure, his passive wasn't the craziest, but still really solid for the time period he released. It was generally worth logging in every day since release for 1000 days just to get this guy right away. Nowadays, he's very meh even with an EZA. Number 3 is AGL, LR, Kale, and Caulifla. These two managed to stay relevant for almost 3 years. They had a kit with stacking defense on supers, stacking dodge up to 66%, and some really insane damage on release. These two could super over 3 times a turn if you were lucky and absolutely crush most events even late into their career. This was one of the most popular units in the game and for good reason. Looking at their kit, even now it seems like they almost knew where the future of the game was headed, but then almost purposely they completely fumbled their EZA. This unit was definitely ahead of its time with crazy damage and a build-up mechanic that many newer units utilize as a bonus rather than a main mechanic. I think most people can agree that their original release was a complete unexpected success and their EZA was a complete letdown. In second place, we've got TEQ God Goku. This unit is the definition of ahead of his time. He's almost exactly like the AGL Frieza we talked about earlier. The main difference here is that this unit has a way better design. Rainbow orb changing on top of decent stats and ceiling is great, but his EZA is what really made him stand out. The reason I consider him ahead of his time is because being almost invincible against movie bosses made him incredibly useful once those red zones actually came out, and then his EZA also managed to be ahead of its time by adding pure Saiyans to that condition, making it even more useful once some of the blue zone bosses came out even later on. This guy was your go-to unit for movie heroes teams for like 4 or 5 years, which is crazy longevity for a dokkan unit, especially one that lived through 4 different steps of power creep and released in 2018 and got an EZA in 2022. Now for honorable mentions, we've got TEQ SSJ4 Gogeta and TEQ LR Goku and Frieza. I didn't want to include them just for their leader skills. Gogeta wasn't necessarily ahead of his time because countering supers was not uncommon for SSJ4 units, and Goku and Frieza were really good but nothing special unless you're looking at their leader skill. The gold medal of this video has to go to Physical Raditz though. This guy is still ahead of his time to this day. You can watch any tier list or ranking video on YouTube and this guy is always number 1 in the triple S tier. Jokes aside though, I know who you're all expecting, and I agree, it's TEQ Ultimate Gohan. Guard, infinite stacking, and amazing stats. This guy had it all and managed to stay useful for over 3 years with no EZA. They made sure not to release anyone even remotely like him unless they were full of conditions and drawbacks all the way until late 2024. They didn't even need to change much for his EZA. All they did was boost his stats a little and add built-in additionals. Now in 2025, he finally got Festival of Battles, which on paper should be the perfect event for him. Sadly, he's just short of being good in the event because in the final stages, he can still get caught by those insane super attacks that do tens of millions of damage. But to be fair, it's crazy he even lasted this long as a 2020 unit. Anyways, let me know what you think of this list in the comments, and if you enjoyed, feel free to check out one of my other videos that should be on screen right now. And don't forget to subscribe if you're new. Thank you all so much for watching.